During a light-hearted interview, Keanu suddenly freezes mid-sentence, recognizing a familiar voice calling out from the audience. As he points into the crowd and an emotional reunion unfolds with someone from his past, Jimmy Fallon is left completely speechless, and the studio erupts in goosebumps and applause. The voice in the dark. There's this one night on late-night TV that still feels unreal, even to the people who work behind the cameras. It begins the moment Keanu Reeves walks onto Jimmy Fallon's stage, thinking it's just another interview about another movie. The studio lights pour over him as the band plays one of his old soundtrack themes, and the crowd rises to its feet. Keanu walks out with that shy half-smile, bowing a little to the audience like they're doing him a favor by being there. On the other side of the desk, Jimmy is already laughing, clapping so hard his wedding ring flashes under the lights. For the millions watching at home, it looks like every other fun, harmless segment. Hollywood star, funny host, big smiles. But if you were close enough, you'd see something else in Keanu's eyes. A quiet tiredness, like a man who hasn't slept properly in weeks. He shakes Jimmy's hand with both of his like he's grateful just to be welcomed. On the walk to the chair, he stops, turns, and waves at the upper balcony where the cheap seats are. A couple of stagehands are caught off guard, suddenly on screen. One of them, a young intern gripping a stack of cue cards, freezes. Keanu notices, steps closer to the edge of the stage, and mouths, "You're doing great," with a small thumbs up. It's nothing dramatic, just a gentle, almost invisible kindness, but the intern's shoulders relax. That's the first hint that tonight won't stay on script. They sit, the applause washes over them and finally dies down. Jimmy launches into his monologue voice, teasing Keanu about his motorcycle collection, about the way he does his own stunts, about how he somehow looks exactly the same in every decade. The jokes land, the crowd roars, and Keanu laughs, but his laughter is quieter than usual, like it's moving through a weight only he can feel. Under the desk, his fingers tap nervously against his knee, a rhythm he doesn't even notice. What the audience doesn't know is that just hours before the show, backstage, his agent had handed him a manila envelope. No explanation, just a look that said this might hurt. Inside were a few faded photographs from a movie set he hadn't thought about in years, a cheap action film from his early career, and a short handwritten note with no signature. 4 words, "You kept your promise." He'd read it once, twice, then folded it carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket right over his heart. During makeup, during rehearsal, during the quiet moments when the band was sound checking, his hand kept drifting to that pocket like it was a wound. On camera, Jimmy leans forward, curious but respectful, sensing the tension even if he doesn't know what it is. "You've had a crazy year, man," Jimmy says softly, his voice dropping out of comedian mode. "New movie, all the charity work, the motorcycle shop, visiting kids in the hospital, and then that accident on set a few months back. How are you really doing?" For a second, the room changes. The audience gets quieter. Keanu glances toward the crowd, then up at the rafters like he's picking his words from the ceiling. "I'm lucky," he says finally. "I get to still be here. Some people don't get that chance. So I try to remember that, pain is information. It tells you where you need to heal, and kindness is the medicine." It's not the kind of answer people expect on a talk show, and it lands heavier than a punchline. A woman in the front row presses a hand to her chest. Jimmy nods, almost solemn for once, then quickly steers them toward lighter ground. A goofy story about Keanu accidentally riding the wrong motorcycle to the wrong set. A viral clip of him helping a stranded couple push their broken car off the highway. The crowd laughs again, but now they're leaning in a little more, watching him, feeling the sincerity in every shrug and every humble. "I just did what anyone would do." To break the tension, Jimmy announces a game. It's a ridiculous segment they cooked up in the writer's room, stunt or script. The idea is simple. They play old clips from Keanu's movies, and he has to say whether the crazy move on screen was done by him or by a stunt double. If he gets it wrong, he has to read an embarrassing line from a fake action movie script Jimmy wrote. It's silly, fast, perfect late-night energy. The first clip rolls, a younger Keanu diving sideways through fake glass. He cringes at his own haircut, the audience roars, and he admits that one was all him. The second clip plays, a brutal motorcycle slide under a truck. Keanu smiles, shakes his head. "That was my double," he says. "She was better than me, honestly." Jimmy seizes on the word, Okay, shout out to the queens of danger out there. The crowd cheers. Keanu nods with real respect in his eyes. Yeah, she saved my life once, he says, almost under his breath. Jimmy hears it and raises an eyebrow, but before he can dig in, the control room cues up the third clip. The screen behind them flashes to another old movie, a low-budget night chase, rain pouring down, headlights cutting through darkness. The camera follows a figure, Keanu, from behind as he runs across a rooftop, leaps, slips. For a heartbeat, he's hanging over the edge, fingers clawing at wet concrete. The clip cuts just before he falls. The audience gasps, then laughs when they realize it's a setup. But Keanu doesn't laugh this time. As the lights from the video flicker over his face, something in him tightens. His eyes aren't on the monitor anymore, they're on some invisible point just past it. On that forgotten set years ago, that stunt had gone wrong. The rain, the distance, the miscommunication. He remembers the lurch of his stomach, the way the world flipped, the sudden jerk of a harness that wasn't supposed to be there yet. He remembers a hand on his harness rope, a voice shouting his name over the storm. A woman's voice, hoarse and furious and terrified. "I've got you, Reeves, don't you dare let go." Jimmy is still playing it for laughs. "So, Keanu, was that you, or did some poor stunt double get hazard pay for that one?" The audience leans forward, waiting for his usual modest answer. But Keanu is quiet, his jaw working, that memory of a rain-soaked rooftop snapping into place with the envelope in his pocket and the unsigned note. "You kept your promise." L. From the balcony, someone laughs at an inside joke only they seem to understand. It's a short, bright sound, cutting cleanly through the murmur of the crowd and the hum of studio lights. It shouldn't stand out, but it does. It's the exact same laugh he remembers from that night in the rain, from the cramped stunt tent where they shared cheap coffee and argued about safety cables and took turns pretending not to care about each other. "Tell him Neo." The voice calls playfully from the dark, just loud enough to carry, using a nickname almost no one close to him ever used. Keanu's whole body goes still. Jimmy stops mid-joke, blinking. The band trails off, one instrument at a time, as if the room itself senses the shift. Cameras keep rolling, red lights glowing like watchful eyes. The audience falls into a hush that no producer asked for. Keanu turns, slowly, searching the shadows above the stage lights. His hand rises to his chest, pressing against the folded note through his jacket. His lips part, and for the first time all night his composure cracks, grief and hope tangling across his face. "That can't be," he whispers, barely audible. And then, with a strangled breath that sounds like a man seeing a ghost and a miracle at the same time, he says one name the world hasn't heard from his mouth in over 20 years. Lena. The balcony ghost. Half the studio doesn't even catch the name at first. They just feel the silence that follows it, heavy and absolute, like someone hit a mute button on the world. Keanu is no longer the relaxed movie star at the desk. He's on his feet before Jimmy can say anything, eyes locked on the dark line of the balcony where the cheap seats disappear into glare. The house lights come up a little, not because the producers ordered it, but because one of the lighting techs panics and hits the wrong switch. Rows of faces blink back into existence. People shield their eyes, whispering, craning to see what he's staring at. Jimmy glances off stage, searching for direction, but the control room is just as stunned, letting the cameras roll because somewhere deep inside every TV producer lives a voice that says, "Don't cut when something real is happening." Near the center of the balcony, a slim figure in a faded leather jacket slowly rises. A baseball cap hides most of her face, but not the line of her jaw, not the way she stands like she's always braced for a fall that might not come. One of the ushers steps toward her, unsure, ready to ask her to sit down. Keanu lifts a hand, palm out, a gentle command that freezes everyone in place. Can you zoom in?" Jimmy mutters under his breath, half to the cameraman, half to God. The big screen behind the desk flickers, the feed jumps, and suddenly the auditorium is staring at a live close-up of the woman in the balcony. Her eyes are wet but steady. A thin scar cuts through one eyebrow, disappearing into the brim of her cap. She pulls it off with a shaky hand, and a murmur moves through the crowd. Lena. Time hits Keanu like a physical blow. 20 years of what-ifs and late-night regrets crash into the present in one unstoppable wave. He remembers hospital corridors and legal silence orders, studio lawyers telling him, You can't contact her anymore, it's complicated. He remembers promising himself he would honor her even if he never saw her again, promising to stand between people like her and the greed that almost killed them both. And now she's here, in the cheap seats, like some ordinary fan who just happened to wander into his life again. "I'm sorry," he says into his lapel mic, his voice cracking on national television. "Jimmy, I need a second." He doesn't care that the segment is ruined, that the internet will tear this apart in 1,000 angles by morning. All he can see is the woman who saved his life hanging onto a frayed rope in the pouring rain, refusing to let go. The director's voice explodes in Jimmy's earpiece, telling him to cut to commercial, crack a joke, regain control. But Jimmy looks at Keanu, really looks at him, and makes a different choice. He swivels in his chair to face the balcony, his usual grin gone, replaced by something quieter and more human. "Hey," he calls gently, "if you're comfortable, do you want to come down?" Lena hesitates. You can see the conflict flicker across her face, the instinct to stay hidden battling the pull of unfinished business. Her hand clutches the railing hard enough that her knuckles blanch. A security guard moves to guide her, but she shakes her head stubbornly. "I can walk myself," she says, and even from the floor they can hear the steel under the tremor in her voice. The audience parts as she slowly descends the narrow side staircase, each step echoing in the stunned silence. Keanu doesn't sit back down. He's standing at the edge of the stage now, fingers digging into the wood, fighting the urge to run to her and terrified of what she might say when she reaches him. Guilt claws up his throat. Guilt for the accident, for not finding her sooner, for all the years he spent telling himself that maybe she was better off without him. Lena reaches the last step. For the first time, they're only a few feet apart, no rain machines, no cameras on cranes, no stunt rigs or studio contracts. Just two people who never really got to say goodbye. Her eyes search his face like she's checking if he's real, like she half expected him to vanish if she blinked. "Hey, Nia," she whispers, voice raw and small in the big room. The red tally light on the main camera blinks twice, then goes dark as the control room finally slams the show to commercial. The audience groans, half in frustration, half in anticipation, as the studio plunges into chaotic off-air noise. And in that sudden privacy, with microphones cutting in and out and producers rushing the stage, Keanu takes one hesitant step toward Lena and breathes. "Why now, after all this time?" Lena swallows hard, glancing at the swarm of crew members closing in. "Because, Keanu," she says, shoulders straightening with the courage of someone who's survived more than a fall. "They're about to make the same mistake again, and this time someone else is going to die if you don't stop it." The night it all went wrong. The last time Keanu heard that particular edge in Lena's voice, the sky was fake, but the danger was not. Rain hammered down in sheets from massive rigs overhead, each droplet catching the glare of floodlights, turning the rooftop set into a shimmering, treacherous mirror. Wind machines roared like jet engines around them, whipping their soaked clothes against their bodies as they stood near the edge, peering into darkness that was really just a padded drop and piles of cardboard boxes. "Remind me why we couldn't shoot this on a sunny day with, I don't know, a nice picnic," Keanu shouted over the mechanical storm, squinting as water stung his eyes. Lena smirked, adjusting the harness at his waist with quick, practiced fingers. "Because then you'd complain about the ants," she yelled back. "Besides, audiences love misery, makes them feel like their couch is a heroic choice." He laughed, but his hands were a little too tight on the safety rail. She noticed. Of course she did. Lena was the kind of stunt coordinator who could spot fear from across a set and treat it like another piece of gear that needed adjusting, not something to be mocked, but something to be respected and managed. That was one of the first things he fell for, that and the way she never treated him like a fragile movie star. "You're going to run," she said, her voice dropping lower as she checked the carabiner one last time. "Full speed, 3 steps, then jump. Don't think about the ground, don't think about the cameras, just think about the mark. The rig will catch you, and if it does—" She paused, eyes locking with his. "I will." Behind them, the director barked into a megaphone, counting expenses instead of blessings. "Let's go, people. Rain. S costing us a fortune. We need this in one take. We roll in 30 seconds. Lena's jaw tensed at the word one. She hated when they said that. One take meant shortcuts. It meant safety checks rushed, riggers pressured, calculations nudged in favor of the schedule instead of the people hanging from wires. She stepped away from Keanu and marched over to the stunt rig operator, her thin frame radiating a fury that even the rain couldn't wash away. "You triple-checked the anchors," she demanded. "Both sides, I want eyes on every knot, every clamp." The operator, a tired man with years of calluses and compromises, nodded but didn't quite meet her gaze. "We're good, Lena. Production wants us to move. You know how it is." "Yeah," she said coldly. "I do, that's why I'm asking again. Check them now." Keanu watched her, admiration and unease tangled together in his chest. She was brave in ways he didn't know how to be yet, unafraid to be the annoying voice of caution in a world built on spectacle. He liked to believe he was principled, but he also liked being liked, and Hollywood had a way of punishing people who slowed things down. The assistant director jogged over, headset askew. "We're burning time, people. Reeves, you ready?" Keanu looked from the AD to Lena. She was still arguing softly with the rig operator, her hands tracing the rope as if she could feel its intent. When she turned back to him, the fight in her eyes softened, replaced by something he rarely saw from her: worry. "I don't like this," she said, voice low. "The distance, the angle, the wet surface, it's too much at once." "We rehearsed," he reminded her gently. "You said I nailed it." "In rehearsal, the rain was half and the wind was off," she shot back. "And you were wearing dry shoes." He glanced down. The soles of his boots glistened with water, the rooftop more slippery than any soundstage floor had a right to be. Fear flared in his gut, but then the director shouted his name again, this time with impatience, and every pair of eyes on set swung toward him. "Keanu, buddy, we need this. We're already over schedule. You got it, man, you always do." That was the other trap, praise as pressure. He felt it pressing on his shoulders, on his ego, on the part of him that didn't want to be the guy who called cut because he was scared. He thought of the hundreds of crew members waiting to go home, of the stunt team who prided themselves on efficiency, of the studio already grumbling about costs. Lena stepped closer, close enough that he could hear her over the storm without shouting. "You don't owe them your bones," she said quietly. "You say no and I'll back you. I'll take the heat." He searched her face, the raindrops clinging to her lashes, the sincerity that had become his compass on this chaos of a movie. "What would you do?" he asked. She didn't hesitate. "I'd fix the rig, reshoot in safer conditions, and go home with everyone alive. But I'm just the stunt girl, remember? You're the star. They listen to you, or they pretend to anyway." The AD's radio crackled, counting down. 10 seconds, roll sound, roll camera. Keanu felt the whole machine of the production grind into motion, slates clapping, extras hitting their marks, camera cranes swooping into place. He knew that if he called it off now, every eye would turn on him like he'd tripped a fire alarm in a crowded theater. He also knew Lena would stand beside him without flinching. He closed his eyes for the briefest moment, inhaling the chemical tang of fake rain and damp concrete, and made a choice that would haunt him for decades. He nodded once. "We go, but if anything feels off, you pull me out. Promise me, Lena." Her jaw clenched. She hated the decision, but she understood it. She grabbed the rope beside his harness, wrapping it around her forearm until the fibers bit into her skin. "I've got you," she said, voice steady, willing it to be true. "I promise." "Pictures up," the director screamed, "and action." Keanu ran. The rooftop blurred under his feet, water splashing up around his ankles as he sprinted toward the edge. 3 steps. 2. 1. The wind slammed into him like a moving wall, tilting his balance at the last second. His right foot hit a slick patch, sliding out from under him. For an instant he was more falling than jumping, arms pinwheeling as the world dropped away beneath him. Lena saw it before anyone else. The wrong angle, the late jump, the way the rope snagged a fraction of a second too slow. "No!" she shouted, hurling herself toward the rig, grabbing the line with both hands just as it went taut. Pain exploded through her shoulder as the weight of his dangling body ripped at her tendons. The rig groaned under the sudden extra strain, metal protesting, one anchor bolt jerking dangerously in its socket. Keanu dangled over the abyss, rain hammering his face, the city backdrop a blur of painted lights. He felt the harness cut into his ribs, felt something give above him with a sickening lurch. Below, the crash pads looked very small and very far away. Panic roared in his ears. "Lena!" he gasped, throat raw. Her boots skidded on the wet rooftop as the rope dragged her toward the edge. Every instinct in her body screamed to let go to save herself, but she tightened her grip instead, teeth bared against the pain. "I said I've got you," she yelled back, voice ripping open in the storm. "Don't you dare let go." Crew members rushed in, grabbing the line, piling onto it with their full weight. But for those first horrible seconds, it was just Lena and a promise and a failing rig holding the star of the movie above a very real drop. Somewhere, a metal anchor shrieked as it tore free. The line snapped sideways. Lena's foot slipped, and as Keanu swung violently toward the edge of the roof, her body pitched forward with the momentum, pulling her terrifyingly close to the black nothing below. His last clear image before everything dissolved into chaos was Lena's face, eyes wide, mouth open in a wordless shout, as the world tilted and both of their lives hung on a single fraying rope. Backstage fault lines. The green room feels too small for the history it suddenly has to hold. The walls are painted a calming blue, the couches soft, the snack table absurdly normal with its bowls of pretzels and neatly sliced fruit. But in the center of it all, Keanu and Lena stand an arm's length apart, like there's an invisible force field between them made of 20 years of silence. They barely remember walking there. One moment they were on the stage, swallowed by a crush of producers insisting on privacy and control. The next, the door swung shut behind them, muffling the roar of the audience and the faint echo of the band playing them through commercial break. Somewhere beyond that door, Jimmy is stalling with improv jokes, buying them time without knowing exactly what for. Up close, Lena looks older, yes, but also sharper, like life has honed her rather than worn her down. The scar through her eyebrow continues down, disappearing into her hairline, a pale reminder of the night he almost lost her. Her right shoulder sits a little lower than her left, the subtle symmetry only visible if you know what to look for. Keanu can't stop staring at it, remembering the way she screamed when the doctors tried to reset it. "I thought," he struggles for words, his usual measured calm shattered. "They told me you left the country, that you didn't want to see anyone from the film. He chokes on the last word, suddenly aware of how cowardly it sounds. "I believed them." Lena huffs out a humorless laugh, dropping her cap onto the coffee table like it weighs too much. "Of course they said that. It's easier than admitting they pushed a stunt too far and almost killed their lead and the woman who saved him." She rubs her injured shoulder absent-mindedly, fingers tracing an ache that never fully left. "Easier to pretend I vanished than to admit they blacklisted me for speaking up." The guilt he's been carrying for years flares white-hot. "Blacklisted," he repeats, stunned, "because you called them out on safety. Because I wouldn't sign their pretty little NDA and say it was just one of those things," she replies, bitterness barely kept in check. "They couldn't go after you, you were the face on the poster, so they went after the girl holding the rope." He feels sick. He remembers lawyers and meetings and carefully worded statements, all framed as protecting the production and avoiding panic. He remembers asking once weekly about Lena's situation and being told it's handled, don't worry, she's being taken care of. He wanted to believe that because the alternative meant admitting he'd turned away when she needed him most. "I should have fought harder," he says, the confession dragging itself out of him. "I should have found you. I let them talk me into thinking staying quiet was the noble thing, that it would save jobs, save the movie. I told myself you'd reach out if you needed me, and when you did," he trails off, ashamed. Lena studies him, the anger in her eyes tempered by something softer, recognition maybe of the young man he used to be, trying to stand up in a world built to keep him sitting down. "You were in a machine you didn't build," she says quietly. "I was angry at you for a long time, but anger is heavy. At some point, I had to decide if I wanted to drag it around forever or put it down and use my hands for something else." He glances at the envelope peeking from his jacket pocket. "The note," he says. "You kept your promise. I didn't even know if it was really you." "That promise wasn't about that one night," she reminds him. "It was about what came after, remember the hospital." The memory hits him in pieces. The sterile smell, the harsh fluorescent lights, Lena lying in a bed with her shoulder wrapped and her forehead stitched. The way she'd waved off his repeated apologies until he was left sitting there, useless and raw. "You said," she continues, voice growing steadier as she steps a little closer, "if you got to keep doing this, you'd do it differently. That you'd protect the people around you. That you'd talk to the kids in the crew, the interns, the extras, the stunt doubles. That you'd use the fact that cameras follow you to point them at the people no one usually sees." He remembers saying those things, half-vows muttered through tears and painkillers and adrenaline crashes. He also remembers thinking, what if I can't live up to that? For years, every small kindness, every insistence on safety, every quiet donation to crew funds and hospitals and stunt charities had been, in his mind, an installment on that debt. "You did it," Lena says simply. "I watched people talk, you know, about the actor who rides the bus with stranded passengers, who waits with fans in the rain, who tells directors, 'No, we reshoot it safe or we don't shoot it at all.' You turned that one night into a lifetime of something better. That's why I wrote the note. You kept your promise." Her words should feel like relief, but instead they land like responsibility. If she's forgiven him, then he has one less excuse to hide behind. The old wound of that rooftop doesn't close, it shifts, opening a new path forward. "So why the warning?" he asks. "What mistake are they about to make?" Lena takes a breath, bracing herself. There's a new film, huge budget, massive franchise, same studio, same stunt coordinator that signed off on our little death dance up there. She nods toward an imaginary rooftop hanging over the green room ceiling. They've got this sequence planned, motorcycles, real traffic, wet streets, all for that one wow shot. And they're using kids, Keanu, young stunt doubles who don't know they're allowed to say no yet. A sharp, protective anger surges through him. He pictures fresh faces lighting up at the chance to be on set, trusting that the grown-ups have considered every risk. He knows too well how quickly that trust can turn into betrayal. "How do you know?" he presses. "Because one of those kids is my niece," Lena replies, her voice dropping. "She called me from the rehearsal. She was excited at first. Then she sent me the storyboards and the schedule. I recognized the shortcuts, the same language. We'll be fine. We'll only do it once. We'll fix it in post if it goes wrong." She shakes her head, jaw tight. "I'm not watching another person I love dangle over a street while some producer worries about the golden hour." Keanu runs a hand through his hair, pacing in the small space. "We can call the studio," he says. "Get your niece pulled out. I'll talk to them. It's not just about her," Lena cuts in gently but firmly. "If she walks, they'll replace her. There's always another hungry kid. This is about the pattern. You know it. I know it. They will keep pushing until someone goes over the edge for real." Outside, there's a knock at the door, urgent and polite at the same time. A production assistant pokes their head in, trying not to stare. We're back from commercial in 90 seconds, they say, voice trembling with the awareness that this is not a normal situation. "The network wants to know if you're okay to continue, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Fallon is improvising." Keanu exchanges a look with Lena. 90 seconds. 90 seconds before he's back under the lights, expected to smile and tell a charming story so everyone can sleep without thinking too hard. 90 seconds to decide what to do with 20 years of regret now crystallizing into a single chance. Lena steps closer, close enough that he can see the fear under her steel. "I didn't come here to haunt you," she says softly. "I came because you're one of the few people they have to listen to. If you say something out there, on that stage, on live TV, they can't bury it with a quiet settlement or a press release. They'll have to change something, or at least they'll have to pretend to, which is where real change usually starts." He thinks about the fans in the audience, about the millions streaming the show, about the young stunt performers watching from cramped apartments, telling themselves the danger is worth the dream. He thinks about the people at the top, the ones who see human beings as line items on a budget spreadsheet. And he thinks about Jimmy, trusting him, counting on him to put on a good show. "This could blow back on you," Keanu says. "On your niece, on your life, are you sure?" Lena's answer is immediate. "I have been lying awake for weeks, replaying that night on the roof, wondering if I should have just dragged you off that set entirely instead of compromising. I'm not making that mistake again. Fear kept me quiet once. I'm done letting it decide who gets to go home." The PA checks their watch nervously. 30 seconds, they whisper, backing toward the door. Keanu feels his heart pounding like it did on that rain-soaked rooftop, except this time the jump is into words instead of thin air. Courage, he realizes, isn't just hanging from a harness or dodging oncoming cars. Sometimes it's looking into a camera and saying something no one wants to hear. He reaches for Lena's hand. She hesitates for a heartbeat, then lets their fingers interlock, a bridge rebuilt over years of silence. "If I do this," he says quietly, "I'm not the hero. I'm just the guy finally listening to the woman who was right the first time." "That's all I'm asking," she replies, squeezing his hand. "Don't be the hero, be the witness." From the stage, they hear Jimmy's voice booming through the walls, forced cheerful but fraying at the edges. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with our guest, Keanu Reeves, and something surprisingly real just happened here tonight." The red ON air, light outside the green room door flicks on. Keanu exhales, feeling the weight of every eye he's about to step in front of. He turns to Lena, searching her face one last time. "You walk out there with me?" he asks. She draws a steadying breath, the same way she did before every dangerous stunt, and nods. "Yeah," she says. "This time we jump together." Hand in hand, they move toward the door, the muffled applause swelling on the other side like the roar of artificial rain, as the world waits to see whether he will step back into the safety of small talk, or leap into a truth that could change everything.